Distinguished Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Registrar, Dean of Students, esteemed faculty, honorable guests, distinguished alumni, fellow student leaders, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moses Desire Kuyu. I'm a man that has been blessed by the Almighty God to have risen to the high office of the first SRC president of this enviable university. On the 9th of March 1957, a crowd gathered at the old polo grounds in Accra to watch a flag come down and another rise in its place. Kwame Nkrumah stood before them and spoke, not merely to thousands under the floodlights, but to a Ghana not yet born. That is the first mark of a statesman. He speaks past the room he's standing in, toward a horizon he will not personally reach. I begin here not out of nostalgia, but out of necessity, because it exposes a paradox that should trouble every one of us in this room. We are living through an age that has produced more leaders by sheer number than any era in history. More elected officials, more heads of states, more people with the power to command a camera or a feed at the press of a button. And yet, by nearly every honest measure available to us, this same age has produced remarkably few statesmen. We have democratized the microphone while impoverishing the message. So let me put before you the question that would occupy us tonight, because I believe it is the defining leadership question of our century. Why does the modern world produce more politicians than statesmen? My thesis is simple. Though its implications are not, the difference between the two is not a difference of office, but of character and understanding. And that understanding is that the difference is the beginning of building nations and leaders that outlast us. First and foremost, we must agree on what leadership is. James McGregor Burns distinguished transactional leadership as votes for favors, loyalty for office, from transformational leadership, which raises both a leader and the led to a higher purpose. Ronald Heifetz sharpened this further by saying that technical problems can be solved with existing authority. Adaptive challenges require society to change its own habits and values, and all of these pass for what we call leadership today. Today, leadership is regarded as technical management dressed in the language of vision. Statesmanship is almost always adaptive work. It asks people to change, but not simply to applaud. Aristotle made the same distinction in his own vocabulary. The ruler who governs for the common advantage produces a just constitution. The one who governs for himself produces a corrupt constitution, regardless of the name the office carries. And the American minister James Freeman Clark offered the same formulation, which I find the cleanest of all. A politician is one that thinks of the next election, and a statesman is one that thinks of the next generation. Now, secondly, we must ask why this century makes statesmanship so rare. Part of the answer lies in the architecture of our attention. Social media did not invent vanity in public life, but it gave the loudest, most provocative voice the same reach as the wisest one, often greater, because outrage travels faster than judgment. And this would go on to reward the performer over the governor, the algorithm over the appropriations bill. Populism thrives in this same soil, offering a villain instead of an analysis, and trading the patient work of policy for the immediate satisfaction of blame. Now, when you come to the realization that when you add short election cycles and a decline in civic education, our elections are consistently rewarding charisma over competence. Now, the Transparency International 2025 Corruption Perception Index put the global average at just 42 out of 100. Ghana scored 43, ranking 76 out of 182. And Afrobarometer also found out that while 74% of Africans still want to choose their leaders through honest elections, barely a third trust the institutions meant to protect that choice. This is not a story of Africans rejecting democracy. It is the story of Africans loving democracy more than the institutions have yet earned. Thirdly, and I say this without hero worship, because none of these examples are without fault or are flawless. Consider what statesmanship looks like when practiced. Now let's go to Botswana. They chose statesmanship, and almost alone on the continent at independence, they have been able to build institutions that are strong enough to outlast any single leader's ambition. You go to Europe and there's Denmark and Finland, who are topping the year's corruption rankings, not because their citizens are inherently more virtuous, but because they build systems of transparency that do not depend on any leader's goodness to function. That, in the end, is the real measure of statesmanship. Not how well a country is led while a great man is alive, but how well it runs after he's gone. Kwame Nkrumah gave us the conviction that self-government was a right, not a favor. Yet, concentrated power in ways that hollowed out the institutions Ghana needed after him. Mandela's genius was his insistence that what separates one person from another is what we make of what we are given, not what we are given. Neither man was a saint, I beg to say. Both at their best chose the next generation over the next news cycle. Now, lastly, and this is why what happens on a campus like ours matters more than most societies admit. A student representative council is not a rehearsal for politics. It is politics. In miniature, complete with budgets, factions, caucuses, and the temptation to trade principle for popularity. I have sat in that seat, and I dare say that a campus is one of the last places a young leader can fail without destroying a nation. Kofi Annan puts it simply: no one is born a good citizen, democrat, or leader. It takes time and education. So build institutions and not followings. A follower disappears when you leave the room, but an institution outlives you. Practice accountability before anyone forces it on you, and marry character to competence. And as Stephen Covey said, leaders should be trusted for integrity, and they should not be useless in a crisis, because when they are useless in such crisis, they fail the people as almost completely as the one who is competent but cannot be trusted. Good intentions are not a substitute for preparation. Now, finally, I return to where I began. Nkrumah spoke on that March night to a Ghana that was not yet born. I ask you to do the same thing tonight. The politician asks what the crowd wants to hear. The statesman asks what the country will need to be true in 20 years' time, and has the courage to say it now, even when the room is not yet ready to applaud. Ghana does not need more people who can win an election. Africa does not need more leaders who can fill a stadium. It needs men and women willing to do the harder, lonelier work of building something that will stand long after the applause has ended, and long after we ourselves are gone. That work begins, as it always has, in rooms exactly like this one, with people exactly like you. Let us begin that work now. Thank you very much.